Her. I've never been one to engage in gossip. It felt pointless. My school isn't abnormally large. It would take days to catch up on gossip from just a week, so I just never paid attention. But some rumors stick around for so long, it's inevitable to know the story. At some point, it's not gossip, it's common sense. It's a story for everyone who goes to my school has to know. Though anyone outside the district will see it as silly gossip, but it's not. It's a gut feeling, something that has no real proof. Nothing but that alarms in your head, yelling you to believe the eerie words spoken about her, to stay away from her. Her name was Maeve. She was quiet and timid. She never spoke in class and always kept her head down. No one even believes she had lived here before 8th grade, even if her transcript says otherwise. She was in math class freshman year and only spoke loud enough for the teacher to hear, having chosen the seat closest to the desk. I don't think I had actually heard her voice until a week before the year ended. She wasn't well known and didn't have many friends, but she had some. She sat in the corner of the courtyard with a few other students. Occasionally the others would come and go, but she never sat in another place. Her entire persona was unnerving and unmoving. No one paid attention to her until a few days before fall break. At first, people were saying that she spoke in class and actually had a full conversation loud enough for people to hear. The only reason people really cared enough was because of how worked up others were over it. Her voice was as sweet as honey. Melody, like a piano ballad. Their eyes almost white. It was all anyone could talk about for the rest of the day. People searched her for wanting to hear her voice for themselves. But it seemed as she just disappeared out of nowhere. One of the students who was present to hear her day had broke up with his girlfriend. Two others kept jabbering about it, and another actually tried to ask her about it. People joked about how she hypnotized them with her voice, but that's all it was. A joke. That's what we told ourselves. Still, I kept my distance. Something about her was just off. Then the next day we was met with 2 more breakups and a rather large bouquet of flowers crudely stuffed in her desk. A female student started theorizing that it was just some dumb superiority complex, and the guys were attempting to stake claim that she was now the hot topic. I couldn't help notice how she crawled back into her shell. But what I hadn't noticed was how far she had come. Until she wasn't looking back to looking like a broken doll, trying to hold itself together. The hairs on the back of my neck stood up as I watched her. The way she walked, the way she carried herself, she just didn't feel right. A lump formed in my throat, a pounding in my head screaming at me to get away and look away. People started to pity her, unsociated. Affection can only be handled to a certain extent. Her boundaries were more than likely more sensitive than normal. Everyone held a sense of protectiveness over her, giving the quarters a harder time. Things eventually died down when fall break started. The whole ordeal was largely disregarded. That was until 2 boys were arrested for harassment. Along with breaking and entering, they were identified as Sebastian and Tristan, 2 students who were in May's presence who had heard her spoke. The trial was relatively quick but had restraining orders and 7 months in juvie. It was startling, but it could never prepare the school for what was about to go down. The night they were meant to be carted off to juvie, they broke out, leaning for Maeve's house. That's where the others were camping out to protect her. 3 people died that night. Tristan and Sebastian themselves were amongst the dead, the third being a student by the name of Andrew. Tristan was beaten to death while Sebastian and Andrew were shot. The 3 other male students were arrested and put on trial. When school started back up, we were divided. Some saw her as an omen of death, or perhaps a siren hypnotizing men with her voice. Others thought she was a victim, being aggressively pursued only to be harassed and have 3 boys die on her front lawn. Maeve kept her head down for the rest of the year. I could breathe again. Students then started to bully her, slipping crude notes into her locker, calling her names and threatening her to never speak to their boyfriends or crushes. Some people comforted her. The teachers never was stood up for her, but they did. But she never spoke. The teachers never called on her, and she eventually just faded back into the background, whispers and rumors being the only thing that kept her name alive. Then Sam started to follow her around. He just trailed behind her as close as possible. No matter how fast she walked or where she went, he was there. She never spoke about it, and he never touched her. There was nothing anyone could do about it, that anyone wanted to do. It went on for weeks, just trailing behind, eyes locked on her as if she was the only thing that existed in this world. People started to trade rumors. People would ask, how far would this go? When would things start to go wrong? The next thing we know, search parties were sent out for Sam. He just disappeared. No trace, no leads, nothing. We all knew, but there was nothing we could say that would be taken seriously. Maeve started showing up with more bruises that week. 3 months ago, a boy committed suicide. His letter was simply a confession to Maeve, telling her how he was madly in love with her, and how he couldn't live if she didn't love him back. The school tried to keep it under wraps, not wanting the backlash that Maeve was inevitably received, and just to not get this out of hand. But there was no use. She walked into class with bruises and cuts, black eyes and swollen lips. People said she deserved it. Others said it was good and that she couldn't seduce anyone else. Some even pitied her. I don't think any of that. God, I was so scared. All I did was stare and wonder why she would let it happen. Why she didn't just move away and defend herself. I couldn't help my curiosity. It was 3 days ago when I was running an errand for my teacher. Found her wobbling out of the girls' bathroom. Blood running in knees. Fresh cuts and bruising. I didn't know what to do. Yeah, I carried her to the nurse office and stayed with her until her parents came to pick her up. I felt like I was on autopilot. What was I even thinking? I knew I'd get in trouble, but I couldn't just leave her there. Before she walked out of the nurse's office, she whispered something to me. I heard it, but I didn't understand until she hesitated. Her breath caught in her throat. She thought for a moment before speaking again. I'm sorry. She was apologizing. It broke my heart how fragile she was. I never understood how people could hurt her, how easily they could just ignore her. She was beautiful. She radiant in magnificence. I didn't understand how I was ever scared of her. My God, her voice was heavenly. I knew no one else would understand. They all saw her as a monster or someone who needed pity. I knew better though. No one deserved her. She was something above all of us. She couldn't come to school next day. I bit my nails and scratched myself in worry. And warden just bugged me. I need to make sure she was okay. I hastily questioned the school nurse on her absence. Oh, right, you're the boy who brought her in yesterday. She gave a tight smile, her lips pressing into a thin line. Her mom called her sick in today. I felt relieved but uneasy. Can I call her house? I just want to check up on her, that's all I needed. Just another moment to feel closer. The nurse thought for a moment before declining. My throat burned, my head was fuzzy, I needed to see her. I gave a stiff nod and continued off the day. I asked around, tried to find out what bus she was on, what stop she was, until I remember a girl who once mentioned Maeve only lived a few doors down from her. So I followed her, and I found where she lived. It was easy to spot Maeve's house. It had been ingrained in my brain ever since it was on the news sophomore year. I couldn't spot her window with ease. It almost felt like fate when I noticed the closest street was so climbable. And listen, you have to understand, I know I sound like all those guys who became obsessed with her, but I swear I'm not. I know her worth. I had wanted to speak to her for so long, but was scared. I just didn't deserve to speak to her. Nobody did. Everyone else held her down, trapped her, undeserving of her presence. No one else could see it, but I could. She never deserved to be tortured like that, so I'm going to put her out of her misery. I'm doing this for her. I'll be her salvation. She won't need to live like this anymore. I'll be back tomorrow.